Let's start by congratulating you on the new CD, a continuation of a journey that you started with the last one, and the next installment is already done, I believe.
Yes, I'm still mixing it, so that ought to come out next year.
Fantastic. I read you were quite surprised by the success of Rich Dame Woman Blues. Is that right?
Well, it was done on, you've heard of a shoestring budget. Well, this was done on a tweezer budget. It was just an album of acoustic blues, most of them almost 100 years old. And Stony Plains is a wonderful label out of Canada, but they're not exactly, rolling in megabucks. So Holger Peterson, who was the owner of that label, loved the idea, but we were on a very limited budget. I literally recorded half of it in my living room, and I did it as a labor of love, but I had a lot of wonderful friends help me with it because they share my love of the early blues pioneers who so deeply inspired all of us. And so that was the idea, was for it to be a tribute to the early blues legends who really, without whom we would have had no blues, and without any blues we'd have had no R&B, and if there'd have been no R&B, there'd have been no rock and roll, and I figure we'd all be doing some uptight minuets someplace. So I thought, to me, they're the very important cultural elders of here in America. So anyway, I put the album together and got my old buddy Taj Mahal to help me on it, and my soul sister Bonnie Raitt played guitar and sang a lovely old spiritual on it with me. And so we put it out just, as I said, as a labor of love, and to our surprise, it was nominated for a Grammy, 2 W.C. Handy Blues Awards, and ended up winning Best Traditional Blues Album of the Year. So, that was very surprising, but very gratifying to me, and it kind of proved the point I was trying to make, that these old blues are still a very relevant form of music that people still want to hear today, because there's something kind of timeless about them. So, and while I was making the record, I realized I was only just beginning to scratch the surface of just a treasure trove of great old material that was, buried in there, just waiting to be rediscovered. So that's what led to the follow-up, which is called Sweet Lovin Ol Soul, and I featured a lot of songs by Memphis Minnie on the second one, and also got Taj Mahal to help me do a couple of songs. We did a Butterbeans and Susie duet called It Ain't What You Used to Have, It's What You're Holding Now, which is a real cute kind of double entendre repartee, and he did another Blind Willie Johnson song with me. But what was different about this album was I enlisted the help of an incredible female guitarist named Del Rey, whom I met a couple of years ago, and we discovered we shared this very devout love for the music of Memphis Minnie, and she plays killer guitar and can play just like Memphis Minnie, and and so between us, I figure we're pretty much bringing Memphis Minnie's spirit back into people's, living rooms, and into just turning people on to this great music. So it's been very well received over here, and it's just been out a couple of months, but it started on the Billboard Blues charts at number 6, so that was pretty auspicious for another little tweezer budget album.
When did it become apparent to you that you were going to have to do more than one album of this nature?
Even before I was finished with the first one, because there were just too many good songs to try to squeeze onto one album, and the further I explored it, the more great stuff I found.
I guess, despite the fact that there's not much money behind you, record company-wise, it must be still satisfying to have a label like Stony Plains being so supportive and sympathetic to the project.
Oh, they are. They're just amazing. Holger Peterson is single-handedly doing so much with his small label out of Canada to keep roots music alive and well. He's very, very supportive, and one of the great people in the music industry. I mean, in an industry that I've been in over 40 years, and he's one of the true hearts that really cares about the music. It's all about the passion of the music for him. So it's great to be able to do these things and have them more than pay for themselves, sell quite well and get, just get a lot of great response wherever we go.
Again, an amazing list of musicians on the record. Did you go into this with specific people in mind for specific roles?
For the second album?
Yeah.
Well, I knew that I wanted to, when I started, exploring the stuff for the first album, I realized that, which was all inspired by Holger and I being in Memphis. I had been nominated for a W.C. Handy Award in around 1995 or something, and we were there together, and after the awards were over, we decided to take a little pilgrimage, rent a car and make a pilgrimage to various blues power spots. And one of the places I wanted to go was to visit Memphis Minnie's gravesite. And it was a very powerful afternoon, just quite amazing little journey we took, and we went and visited where Robert Johnson had played and worked on this plantation and so forth. And so Memphis Minnie definitely is a sort of main figure in both of the albums, but more so on the second. And I knew that I needed to get Del Rey to properly bring her guitar work to people's attention. So Del Rey and then her partner Steve James, another fine American roots blues picker, and they do a lot of the Memphis Minnie Kansas Joe duets on the record. So and I knew I wanted to use Dave Matthews on piano to help me do Empty Bed Blues. I choose people strictly for what their abilities are, not having anything to do with how famous they might be or anything, but just people that have also spent years steeping themselves in this kind of music. Like on the first record, the title song, Richland Woman Blues, I got my old buddy John Sebastian, who most people know from The Lovin' Spoonful. But he and I both grew up in the Village in the early 60s, and that title song, Richland Woman Blues, was originally done by Mississippi John Hurt, and I called up John Sebastian because he loved the playing of Mississippi John Hurt and used to just sit at his feet, scrutinizing every little move he made with his fingers and trying to figure out how he finger picked the way he did. And so, for instance, the song I do with Bonnie Raitt on Richland Woman is a song called It's a Blessing, which was I originally heard it on a field recording by Mississippi Fred McDowell and his wife singing it. He was playing and she was singing. And of course, Bonnie was taught to play slide guitar the way she does by Mississippi Fred McDowell himself. See, we were both lucky enough to be around when the last of these great bluesmen were still alive, and we bluesmen and women, and we we both spent a lot of time sort of being mentored by them. So I chose her for that song. It was a perfect choice. And that's kind of how I make my records. I just try to think who would sound the best doing this particular song, Well, and I also have, I've got Alvin Youngblood Hart, who's a wonderful bluesman, and doing another couple of Kansas Joe Memphis Minnie duets with me, and Tracy Nelson singing a Bessie Smith, Clara Smith duet with me. So I just find people that I know are going to bring the right sound and spirit to the project, and I think I lucked out again.
Because you've also got the great Blacktop Perkins as well.
Oh my God, how could I forget about him? 92 years old, flew out to California by himself, went to the studio, rolled up his sleeves, played the best piano, great blues piano. I hope I'm still breathing when I'm 92, let alone still, singing the blues and sounding good. I mean, he's just remarkable.
He's an inspiration, isn't he?
It's fun to work with him as well.
Yeah. There's a return to your old jug band days too, and your old jug band colleague Fritz Richmond on there as well.
Oh, Oh, that's right. How could I forget that? The title song, Sweet Lovin Ol Soul Sweet Lovin Ol Soul was originally done by Sarah Martin and her jug band in the early 30s. I just called the best jug player in the whole wide world, which is Fritz Richmond, who used to play jug with us in the Jim Kweskin jug band back in the folk scare of the 60s. And so he was still playing his butt off, and it just sounds, I mean, it's just amazing what a powerful sound you can get out of a jug if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the music of Memphis Minnie is a big part of this album. Do you remember where and how you discovered her music?
Yes, I was, I grew up in Greenwich Village, New York City, and it was, at the time I was growing up, it was the hub, sort of a mecca for people who were just discovering America's musical roots, and every Sunday in the park, in Washington Square Park, there would be what they used to call hootenannies, which were just a series of totally loosely unorganized jams, and there'd be some people clustered in a corner playing bluegrass and some others playing blues and somebody else playing old-timey Appalachian music, and then there'd be some protest singers and just a huge variety of stuff. And so I people were just discovering, I would be playing Carter family music with one gal and then messing around with some blues with some other guys. And so some friends of mine, including David Grisman and John Sebastian, came running up to me one day and said that they had formed a jug band, which although I was delving into a lot of old blues and listening to a lot of old records, I had never heard of a jug band before, which they explained what it was. And they said that they were going to be they were being signed to a record deal by a woman named Victoria Spivey, who was around on the scene. She was a contemporary of Bessie Smith, but here it was the 60s. I believe she was in her late 60s by then. But she was, she had recorded many, many blues sides in the 20s and 30s, and had even appeared in movies and so forth. But she'd somehow managed to survive that era and was living in New York, and was the first artist that I know of who was savvy enough to own her own record label. Even way back then, it was like 62 at the time, 1962. So they came running up and they said, she's signing us to her label, but she says we need some sex appeal, and she suggested that we ask you to join the band. You have to remember some of them, were still in the, sort of the teenage acne stage of things. I mean, and so, and of course it was before women's lib, so I didn't feel at all insulted by this, by this remark, and I just said, well, sure, it sounds like fun. And so here I had the incredible luck of being mentored and taken under the wing of one of the great blues divas of all time, Victoria Spivey, who just literally put her arm around me and just said, now, honey, I'm going to tell you all the tricks of the trade, and she said, I'm going to show you the ropes here, and she brought me to her house and played me lots of old 78s and scratchy reel-to-reel tapes and stuff, helping me find songs to record on the album. And it was her who first turned me on to Memphis Minnie, and I heard the first Memphis Minnie first Memphis Minnie song I ever heard was called Tricks Ain't Walkin'. And it was so haunting. It's a song about times being so hard that even the gals that are out plying their trade on the street, so to speak, are having a hard time making ends meet. And this song emerged during the last Great Depression. Frankly, I think there's another one on the way. But anyway, that was the first Memphis Minnie song I ever heard, and Victoria Spivey told me all about her and played me a lot of other stuff, and I was a goner from that point on. But it took 40 years before I actually recorded that song.
Yeah. Is it something you've waited for the right time to record that song?
Well, it just one thing and another. I didn't end up putting that song on that album. But I'm glad I waited, because I think I've done it justice. And that's the same goes for Bessie Smith's Empty Bed Blues. I plan to do that on the record, and I think it's better that I waited till now, because I think I have a lot more of the life experience and vocal chops that really is required to put across a song like that. So all good things in their time.
Yeah. Apparently you mentioned online, and I'd say you were talked out of recording Empty Bed Blues way back in the Jug Band days.
Yeah, that was, well, a record label named Elektra Records bought our contract out from Victoria Spivey. And so we ended up making the record for Elektra Records, and the producer probably heard that I sounded way too much like an inexperienced ingenue to be singing something as heavy-duty as Empty Bed Blues. So it's okay. I am sure he was right. But I think I pull it off now.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Can you describe the impact someone like Bessie Smith would have had on you as a young girl discovering the blues?
Well, I had run away from home, but of course, living in Greenwich Village, I didn't run very far. I just ran a few blocks away just to get out from under my parents. You know how it is when you're a teenager. And it landed in the in the employ of a couple who had a couple of little girls, and I was their mother's helper, it was called then. I think it's called an au pair or a nanny now. And so after I would put their kids to bed and this couple would go out for the evening, I would explore these walls and walls, shelves and shelves of records that they had, including a lot of 78s of Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Fletcher Henderson, and Bessie Smith. And I'll just never forget, coming across they used to be in like albums. There'd be like these brown envelopes with about 6 or 8 78s in a big package. Nowadays, between iPod and CDs and everything, people forget that this music used to come in a much larger format, But anyway, I remember putting on the 78 and hearing the little scratchy beginning of it, and then this incredibly rich, powerful, soulful, profound voice came out of the speakers and started singing Empty Bed Blues, and I was just blown away. I had never heard anyone sing with a voice like that before. And I just, that just drew me into this kind of music from that moment to this. I still listen to Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey and Memphis Minnie all the time. And I like a lot of modern artists, but there's something timeless about the blues and the way these people express themselves that I never get tired of listening to.
For sure. It's been a busy time for CD releases for you in the past couple of years. You've had a career retrospective put out. There's some live material from the 70s, another CD of children's material, and a collaborative album with Eric Bibb and Rory Block. Would this be one of the busiest times of your career?
Absolutely. I have made the 30-year retrospective, I'm a Woman, 30 Years of Maria Muldaur, came out a year ago. And people don't realize that they mean 30 years from the time I made Midnight at the Oasis. And so that Shout Records asked me to put that together, and I get to choose all my personal favorites, as well, of course, of including the big hits that everybody knows and loves, like I'm a Woman, Midnight at the Oasis, of course, Don't You Feel My Leg, It Ain't the Meat, It's the Motion, all the big favorites from my early Warner Brothers days. But what people do not realize is that I've made about 30 albums since then. That's roughly one a year. And my most busy time started in the early 90s, and I think since 1990 or 1991, I'm not exactly sure. I think I've made just about 14 or 15 records, and I've got one in the can that's the third in the trilogy, and it's called Naughty, Bawdy, and Blue. And in this next one that I've already recorded and have to start mixing pretty soon, it's specifically a tribute to the early classic blues queens, and when they say classic blues queens, it's as differentiated from like Lucille Bogan and Memphis Minnie. These women were not country blues artists. They were they sang, they fronted little jazz bands. They kind of stood at the crossroads where jazz and blues intersected, because they had, often musicians as good as, Louis Armstrong and Katz and his band backing them up. And they were definitely blues singers. They were definitely among the first pop stars. I mean, they sold in the millions. Some of the sides they cut sold in the millions of records, which for an era when most of their audience was dirt poor, when there was a huge depression going on in America anyway, and for the music was so kind of raw and authentic, and yet it still sold millions of copies. And they were like stars. They had fancy gowns, and they came out and had outfit changes and all this stuff. So I realized that between Victoria Spivey and Sippy Wallace, another great blues queen who was also a contemporary of Bessie's and Ma Rainey and recorded a lot in that era, I was lucky enough to get to know both of them and have them mentor me. In fact, Sippy Wallace and I recorded and performed together on many occasions, and so I wanted to give them the attention they deserve. Everybody kind of seems to worship and revere the guitar slingers, the mythical guitar slingers like Robert Johnson and Son House and Skip James, and all of whom are absolutely great, but you got to remember that they were kind of very obscure in their day. They were absolutely incredible, but they had a much smaller audience, whereas these blues queens really put on a whole show and toured around, and played lots of vaudeville theaters and stuff, and were a huge part of, what makes this music so great, and the human voice, no matter how fabulously anybody plays guitar, and there's so many incredible and very fascinating styles of blues guitar. I mean, no two people play alike, and there's a lot of, there's whole instruction videos and booklets and so forth, and tapes and CDs and so forth, where people today are still trying to get their fingers out of a knot and try to figure out how some of these guys played like this, But I don't want the queens of the blues to be forgotten, because they certainly did a lot to put this music on the map. And the cool thing is, it's still on the map. Obviously, people still want to hear it. I think there's way more blues clubs and blues festivals and blues bands and blues artists, blues record labels than there ever was back in the 20s and 30s. So this music is proliferated all over the world, and I think it's a good thing. What I say in my liner notes is this is a bluesy old world, and it seems to be getting bluesier every minute, and we're going to need some good blues to help get us through.
I believe also some of your old Blacktop releases from the 90s are finally re-released too, is that right?
Excuse me?
From Blacktop, the albums you did with them in the early 90s?
Oh, yes. I did 2 albums for Blacktop Records, which was a wonderful blues label out of New Orleans, which went belly up a few years ago, and I had made 2 great albums for them. One was called Louisiana Love Call, in which I celebrated my longtime love affair with the music and culture and spirit and the people in New Orleans. I I've spent a good third of my time down there in recent years, and I got to play with my old buddy Dr. John. We did a couple of duets, and the Neville brothers were on it, and Zachary Richard, and I actually got to sing a duet with Aaron Neville, which was one of the thrills of my life. And then I did a follow-up record, which had more of a Memphis feel, called Meet Me at Midnight, in which I used a lot of Memphis musicians and got Ann Peebles and some different gals that backed me up on it. And so sadly, that was out of print for several years, and now Shout Factory's reissued those, so they're all selling like hotcakes. Go figure.
That's good to hear. And have you got any plans for what you'd like to do after the final installment of this trilogy is out, recording-wise?
I got two. One is going to be called Steady Love, and it's going to be just my straight. I have a band called the Red Hot Bluesiana Band, and they're my everyday power trio, I call them. Who we do what I call Bluesiana music, which is sort of a gumbo of R&B and very New Orleans flavored R&B and blues, and what I call swamp funk, and we just tour around everywhere and play a lot of blues festivals and blues clubs and so forth, and we're just going to take some of the songs that just go over the best live and finally put them on a CD, and so that's going to be called Steady Love, and that's the title song is a Greg Brown song that I really love, that we do at all our shows. And then I also have, I suppose this is a secret, but what the heck, it's all the way over in Australia. I don't know if you saw the recent Martin Scorsese film about Dylan called No Direction Home. Did you see that?
Hasn't shown here as yet, but looking forward to seeing it very soon.
Yeah, well, they interviewed me extensively for that. I mean, as well as a whole bunch of other people, and also Dylan is interviewed, and it's all about the early days of Bob Dylan's first years as a songwriter and singer, and since I was there at the time, right there on the scene, I'm interviewed quite a lot in the film, and I think as a result of that, and it was shown on the public TV stations here in the States, and God, I can't tell you how many calls I got from people all over saying, "Hey, I just saw you on the Bob Dylan movie," and I'm quite sure that as a result of that, I got an offer to do an album of Dylan tunes.
Oh wow!
And I don't want to tell you more about it than that, because it's still, being negotiated, but it's going to be killer. It's going to be great.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that ought to keep me busy for a few years.
I think so.
But I'd love to come to Australia. I haven't been in, about, I think, maybe 10 years.
I was just going to say, be about 10 years, I think, yeah.
I had the best time. I think I've been there 4 or 5 times, and I just love it there. I love the people and just the whole feel of it, and people seem to respond to my music. And I last time I toured there was with a fabulous New Orleans piano player named John Cleary.
That's right, yeah.
And who's actually an English bloke, but he's sort of a transplant from England, and had gone to New Orleans and really absorbed all the musical styles. And he and I just toured for 3 weeks and played everywhere and had the best time and turned a lot of people on to this kind of music. And so now, of course, he's playing with Bonnie Raitt, but I'd love to come there with my Bluesiana band and play some of this music for the folks down there.
You'd fit in beautifully to our festival season. We must get you down for that.
I'm ready. Just say the word.
Maria, thanks so much for your time. It's been great to catch up with you again, and thank you for keeping this wonderful music alive, and we're already looking forward to part 3 of the trilogy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And are you going to play some cuts from it while you're... Oh,
you bet. This will we'll stretch this out to it'll be a 2-hour special when I'm finished with it. Don't worry.
Oh, wow. Great. Well, I hope I was somewhat articulate.
No, as always, you're sounding wonderful.
Okay, darling. Well, thanks so much for your interest, and I hope maybe this will kind of inspire some promoters to bring us down there.
I sure hope so.
Okay, sweetie.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye.